Okay, then. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. How are you today? I hope that you enjoy your morning. Then we have actually a bright morning in Salatiga today. We can see. Tadi sudah mulai, sudah terdengar dari depan sudah. Okay, I'm sorry. There was a technical problem. Once more, hello everybody. Who are you today? I hope that everyone enjoyed your morning. Morning in Salatiga today in EIN Salatiga. Honestly, we can see clearly Merapi Mountain from the window of our office today. That I hope that this is a very beautiful morning to discuss our topic today. That is quantitative research in English language teaching, in particular in general language teaching. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, thanks to God, the one, the mighty, the merciful God that we can meet today. Before we start our discussion, let me introduce you, myself and my team here. My name is Norwanto. I am the head department of English education. And around me, we have Bu Nur Mutmainah as the Secretary of English Education Department, also the contact person of this seminar. We have also IT team. We have Mas Purnomo, Mas Sulis, Mas Agus, who has worked hard to make everything happen today. And then to make it short, we have 3 agendas today. The first is introductions from the Dean of the FTIK of the Education Faculty here. And the next is the presentations, and the last is question and answer. For the first, we have spotlight our Mr. Dean. Let me introduce you. Our Dean is Profesor Dr. Mansur. Ya, selamat datang Profesor Dr. Mansur.
Ya, terima kasih.
Ya, beliau ini namanya cukup singkat, tetapi reputasi beliau sangat panjang. Beliau akan memberikan sambutan singkat untuk diskusi untuk seminar kita pagi hari ini. Monggo, Profesor Mansur.
Ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning all. Yang kami hormati para Bapak Wakil Dekan, Bapak Ibu Kaprodi, Sekprodi di lingkungan Tarbiyah, YIN Salatiga, khususnya Prodi Tadris Bahasa Inggris, Bapak Dr. Nurwanto dan Bu Mutmainah yang mengadakan webinar saat ini. Serta semua dosen dan karyawan, mahasiswa semua, para peserta webinar yang kami banggakan. Wabil khusus, actually para narasumber yang telah meluangkan waktu dan memberikan ilmu dan berbagi pengalaman yang kami muliakan, yakni Bapak Dr. Hamzah dari Jauh Padang dan Bapak Dr. Ruandi ya, dari Prodi PAI Pasca Sarjana YIN Salatiga. Pada hari ini kita akan mengikuti webinar bersama tentang penelitian yang dapat dijadikan salah satu bahan dalam melakukan penelitian dengan tema quantitative research, termasuk ada hubungannya dengan pembuatan skripsi tesis bagi para mahasiswa serta para dosen dalam membimbing penelitian mahasiswa atau penelitian lebih lanjut. Oleh karena itu, webinar ini sangat penting diikuti oleh para mahasiswa. Ya, oleh para mahasiswa termasuk para dosen yang membimbing penelitian dan semua saja yang berminat dalam dunia penelitian. Research is an in-depth inquiry into a problem which needs an amicable solution. How to do correlation research. There are many different methods you can use in correlation research. To test your hypothesis, you will statistical analyze quantitative data. Quantitative research is defined as systematic investigation of phenomena by gathering quantitative data and personnel or performing statistics, mathematics, or computational techniques. Writing an introduction to research paper, what to include, introduction, new topic, create some context and background, tells you read about the research you plan to carry out, state your rationale, explain why your research is important, state your hypothesis. We can discuss in this activity. With we follow this activity, I assume we can add our knowledge, our experience actually in research study. With research become source of knowledge because can grow and develop our knowledge. We hope this activity can add blessed from our. So before we continue our this activity, we begin with basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I say, praise be to God, Lord of the worlds. I have more or less nobody perfect, so I ask for you forgiven. Sebelum saya akhiri, saya berikan pantun yang isinya YIN Salatiga letaknya di antara dua kota Surakarta dan Semarang, sehingga Bapak narasumber, Bapak Dr. Hamzah dan para peserta webinar di luar kota, jika mau ke Salatiga sudah ada answer-answer yang jelas. Kemudian selanjutnya mahasiswa sangat beruntung masuk di Fakultas Tarbiyah Salatiga, terutama di TBI, Tadris Bahasa Inggris. Karena mengapa? Pada tahun ini dibatasi hanya 2 kelas setiap satu jurusan, termasuk Tadris Bahasa Inggris, berarti hanya 70 mahasiswa, padahal yang daftar kemarin itu ratusan lebih lipat. Sehingga sangat berbahagia sekali bisa masuk ke Tadris Bahasa Inggris di IAIN Salatiga. Maka pantaunya, IAIN Salatiga ada di Jawa Tengah, antara Surakarta dan Semarang tempatnya. Aku bangga kuliah di Fakultas Tarbiyah, apalagi Tadris Bahasa Inggris program studinya. Terima kasih. Kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Dean. Thank you for the pantun. That's great things that we can listen today. And then to make it short, then we will have the first presenters today for the first sessions. Let me inform you, but for your information, for all the participants today, we have around 10 until 15% of the participants are from non-English department. So for the presenters, you may use English, Indonesians, or you may mix them. Okay, the first presenters is Dr. Hamzah. He is from Universitas Negeri Padang. Dr. Hamzah is the head department of master degree, particularly the English education department, right? And then for the educations, undergraduate was from Universitas Negeri Padang, and then master degree was from Macquarie University of Sydney, and then PhD was from University of Indonesia. Bapak Hamzah today will discuss about experimental research, starting from basic knowledge on experimental research, what is experimental research, some part of them, and then also the methodology in this experimental research, and also the last thing that is different from other discussions is that how to do this experimental research online. This is lately, since March, maybe it was a big problem for our students, for my students particularly, because when they listen experimental research, then what come to our mind is that we have to come to school, creating experimental and control classes, but when everything changes, everything goes online, then so what should we do then? That's our biggest problem, our students. But maybe it is also the problems of other participants at this seminar. So then I will let Mr. Hamzah to share, to discuss the experimental research to all of us. And then please, Mr. Hamzah, you may start your presentations.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yang saya hormati Bapak Profesor Dr. Haji Mansur sebagai Dekan Fakultas Tarbiyah IAIN Salatiga. Selanjutnya Bapak Nurwanto, PhD, sebagai Ketua Jurusan Tadris Bahasa Inggris. Dan tentunya saya juga mengucapkan rasa hormat saya kepada Bu Mutmainnah yang menjadi Ketua Panitia acara ini. Dan selanjutnya yang saya hormati juga Bapak Dr. Ruandi MA yang bersama saya akan menyajikan topik hari ini, dan seterusnya kepada teman-teman peserta seminar. Oke, ucapan terima kasih juga tentunya kita sampaikan kepada panitia yang sudah bersusah payah untuk melaksanakan acara ini, dan sehingga bisa berhasil dengan sukses sampai sekarang. Pada hari ini, saya akan menyajikan topik Experimental Research in ILT. Dalam seminar ini, nama saya Hamzah, MA dari UNP, dan sudah kita kenal semua. Dan pendidikan akademik saya tadi sudah dibacakan, dan di sini juga di bahan sudah ada. So in this presentation, I'd like to present the topic into several subtopics. Firstly, I'd like to review the research. There's actually the very basic understanding about the research. The second one, I'll move on to the experimental research in English language teaching. We are going to look at how the people implement the research in English language teaching. And then I would like to review the experimental research design. And the research design normally actually has been a hot discussion among the practitioners, because there are three types, right? Most of them actually emphasize the validity of the research. And the next one, other related aspect of experimental research. And the last one, I'd like to review a little bit about the experimental research on online learning. Even though I tried to find out the experimental research during the COVID pandemic, actually, it is likely that all the experimental research still ongoing. So the studies mostly are from the distance learning education. Now let me move on to, okay, probably a slideshow. Okay, let me start by reviewing the experimental research in ILT. So we start from the primary purpose. So what is the purpose of our meeting today? Is to provide you with sufficient background to grasp and critically evaluate examples of experimental design that you find in the literature. And the second one, actually, we really hope then that this activity may help you to identify the proper research design you may select in addressing your unresearched question, either it is for your proposal for S1, Sarjana, or S2 also. So let's see, the basic point we are going to look at is what is research and what is not research. So the first one, actually, we need to understand that research isn't information gathering, even though the people say library research. But in our understanding, for experimental research, we look at the information gathering is not a research, because for information gathering, actually, there is no contribution to the new knowledge. Because normally research, we hope, we expect that the result, the finding, actually contribute to the field of the study in which the experimental research actually conducted. The second one, research isn't the transportation of fact. So merely transporting facts from one resource to another doesn't constitute research. Why is that? The same also, no contribution to the new knowledge. Probably if we contribute from one source to another, this might make existing knowledge more accessible, but still there is no contribution. So what is the research then? The research is the systematic process of collecting and analyzing information or data in order to increase our understanding of the phenomenon about which we are concerned or interested. So systematic process of collecting and analyzing information or data to increase our understanding of the phenomenon about which we concerned or interested. So probably we start from this one, right? So we know what is research and what is not research. Okay, the next one. So what is the main purpose of doing the research? So if you look at here, there are two main purposes of a research. The first one is to solve currently existing problem. For us in education, specifically in English language teaching, ELT, we know the main problems. We look at the existing problem normally from the student achievement, from the student ability, whether actually their ability they achieve in accordance with the course purpose or aims or objectives. The second one, to contribute to the general body of knowledge, in particular area of interest. So that's why we need to look at the novelty of our research. So some students actually just try to copy or to copy the same topic, but they do in the different area. So we call that replication. And the next one, probably for solving the problem or validating the truth. And then we can actually do this in various ways. And I don't know, wait a minute. I think there's, oh yeah, this one. There are several ways actually of validating the truth and solve the problem. We can do that by personal experience, or by intuition, or by social or cultural consensus, religious scripture or interpretation, logical philosophy or logical reasoning, and scientific method. So for doing the research, actually, we use scientific method. But I think it is also good to understand that scientific method is not the only way to validate the truth. It's not the only way to solve the problem. But as a scientist, as an academician, we use the scientific method to solve our academic problem, to solve our educational problem, to solve our social problem. But we need to understand this is not the only way. Okay. All right. Now, we say the last one, scientific method. What is scientific method actually? I just got this picture from online, and I add some description related to this one. There are actually 7 stages in scientific method, and there is the 8th that's communicating the result. So when you are a student, your the application of this scientific method will result in communicating the result. So there are 3 main points actually, which are very important in this one. The first one, statement of the problem, statement of the hypothesis, statement of the conclusion. But we cannot achieve the 3 unless we do the rest. So the first one, state the problem. The second one, state the hypothesis, formulate the hypothesis. The last one, draw a conclusion. The 3 actually need other steps. Before we formulate the hypothesis, for instance, we need to identify the variables. We need to state the problem. Before we state the problem, we need to make the observation. So probably in doing the experimental research, this is the most important one. Make the observation. How you do the observation? There are 2 ways actually. There is so-called empirical observation and also theoretical observation. In empirical observation, we go to the field, we go to the classroom, we check the gap between what it should be and what it is. Does Solent and does same kalau in other language. So we look at the difference, the gap between the objectives, the achievement of the objective, and also the achievement of the student toward the objective. So that's the first gap that we are going to look at in experimental research. When we have got this gap, actually, we move on to the second stage. This is called theoretical gap. So we look at the theories related to this problem, and we try to study the research in the area so that we may have the history of the research in the area. So the result of the study, the first one, we know what have been studied. And from what have been studied, actually, we can also draw what have not been studied. So the understanding about what have not been studied actually will lead into the novelty topic. Novelty, this is one characteristics of the good research, that the problem actually has a novelty. That's new. The newness, we get the newness of the topic from the analysis of the history of the research. And then when we have got this novelty topic, then we try to identify the variables. And then after we got the variables, there are 3 other steps here that we need to do. The first one, literature review and discussion with the expert. So it is good also to bring your topic to the expert. And also you do preliminary study. Just try to make it a small reset, check the result. And then if you have got this one, when you have got this one, literature review, you have discussion with the expert, you have preliminary study, then you can formulate the hypothesis. So the hypothesis actually is the first answer, the theoretical answer to your problem. And then when you finish formulating the hypothesis, and then since it is the experimental study, you need to design the experiment. It means you develop the research methodology and make sure the research methodology actually is, we can say that almost perfect, because for experimental research, you cannot change the research methodology when you are in the field. So we expect that the research methodology, for instance, the instrument you need, and then the materials that you're going to use should be settled before you go to the field. And the next one, for data collection, and then you have 3 activities also. The first one, data collection, data analysis, and data presentation. And if we look at these steps of scientific method, these steps also will be reflected in the result. Say when you communicate the result, the communication can be in 2 ways. Written, you write the thesis, dissertation or scriptsy. Spoken communication, you present in the seminar, can be international seminar or national seminar. But the element of your report actually will reflect the stages. You start from the introduction and review of related literature. And after that, you have methodology, you have result, you have conclusion. So this is the scientific method. This is the steps that we need to follow when we are doing experimental research. So the experimental research actually will follow the step of scientific method strictly. Okay. May I continue? Okay. Now, there's the background, the introduction to experimental research. Okay, let's see now, what about the research in ILT, English Language Teaching? So we say here, one of the major tasks of English teaching or learning research is to explore complex processes and relationships among variables such as teachers' language input, various types of instructional programs, learners' literacy, and attitude toward learning environment. So this is, we call these variables. You can choose variables from this area. Either it is from teachers' language input, various type of instructional programs, learners' literacy, attitude toward learning environment. You can use this one as an independent variable, and we can use the student achievement, student ability, or student skills as a dependent variables. So English teaching practitioners and researchers carry hypotheses about why students behave and learn the way they do. Okay, now if we look at the research in ILT, it can be classified into descriptive, associational, and intervention. Now, I also find this diagram, probably qualitative, quantitative, and research by practitioners. So today, we are going to look at the experimental and quasi-experimental and pre-experimental, and after that, we have also correlational, but beside this one, we have also single subject, casual comparative, and survey. So probably the student and all of us also need to get the information about the other type of the research. So and our understanding about quantitative research will be complete. Now, we are moving on to experimental research. There's one type. Now, what is experimental research? Now, if we look at here, experimental research is the application of scientific method to research. So we have discussed about the scientific method, the stages, and in which conditions are controlled. This is the very specific characteristics of experimental research, that the conditions are controlled. So formally, they apply the experimental research actually in the laboratory, so it is very easy to control the condition. But now we use that one in the field, not in the laboratory. One or more independent variables are manipulated or applied. So manipulate or applied to one dependent variables. So we have discussed earlier several possible independent variables can be the teaching procedures, so technique of teaching, and then the dependent variables can be the student achievement, student skills, student ability. Now the experimental research allow to evaluate the causal relationship among variables. So in experimental research, actually, we're going to look at the causal relationship, while all other variables are eliminated and controlled. Now, when we do the experimental research, actually, there are several things that we need to keep in mind. Firstly, that the experimental research is quantitative positivism, who are actually the experimental research will answer the question yes or no. So accepted or rejected, black or white. There is no gray area in the experimental research. It should be black or it should be white. And in experimental research, we are going to use numerical data. It is different from qualitative. The rational data, interval, ordinal, or categorical. And the structure design. We need to settle the design before we go to the field, that it can be true, quasi-experimental, or pre-experimental. And then prepare instruments. Before we go to the field, we need to have the instrument actually valid and reliable. And the next one, statistical analysis. Experimental research require the statistical analysis. Actually, there are two possibilities. Either it is parametric test or non-parametric test. For parametric, we have t-test, one-way or two-way ANOVA or ANCOVA. And when the data actually are not qualified for doing parametric, we may turn into non-parametric. The last one is hypothesis testing. The main actually activities of experimental research is to test the hypothesis. We have so-called null hypothesis, alternative, and working hypothesis. Okay, this is only reasons why if a researcher give any consideration to experimental method. You see from several experts actually in different books, they say that experimental research is actually very important in English as a foreign language environment. You see 1, 2, and 3. Okay. This also another reason. Probably we need to go a little bit faster. And then also the first one we discussed is about research design. Okay. Now let's me move on to the next topic. That's about the research design. In practice, the accumulation of evidence for or against any particular theory involves planned research design for collection of empirical data. See, from Campbell and Stanley, actually, who tried to popularize this one in 1963, we have 3: pre-experimental, quasi-experimental, and true experimental. And they view the experimental research as the means for settling dispute regarding educational practice. We are going to look at which one is more effective to improve or to increase the student achievement, to increase the student skills, to increase the student ability, for specifically in English language teaching. And the only way of verifying educational improvement, and also the only way of establishing cumulative tradition. Now, we are going to discuss this one by one. We start from true experimental, quasi-experimental, and pre-experimental, and we are going to look at the design and also how the true experimental is different from quasi-experimental and also is different from pre-experimental research. I don't know whether apakah saya harus menggunakan bahasa Indonesia juga atau bisa diikuti para peserta. Ada feedback? Terus saja.
So far, there is no feedback, and there are some questions in English too from the participants.
Okay, thank you. So it means I continue with English, right? Okay. The experimental research design, we start from the first one. That's the true experimental research. Okay, so there are several characteristics of the true experimental design. The main characteristic actually is randomization. Randomization of subject and randomization of groups. And the second characteristic is control, the presence of control. The third characteristic is the manipulation. So if we look at from the first one, randomization of subjects, now the subject actually, in this case, of course, we also learn about this, the subject is the sample of our study. The sample is derived from population. The subject should be derived from the population as the representation. So it means the subject, the sample actually should represent the population, because later on we are going to make the generalization, the decision about, the conclusion about the subject will be generalized into the target population. But in the research also, since this we try to make the comparison, then every subject has an equal chance of being assigned to experimental and control group. In experimental study, normally we have, in true experimental research, we have two groups, experimental group and control group. Now, the subject should be assigned to this group actually, and they should have equal chance. It means the researcher actually should not be biased by selecting some people, the good participant to be in the experimental group and the rest in the control group. But all the subject should have an equal chance to be in either experimental or control group. Through random assignment of subject under experimental and control group, chances of systematic bias eliminated. So So we really hope that there is no bias from the researcher in his or her study by trying to make the imbalanced group. And also randomize the group. When you have two groups, then you need to select randomly which one will be experimental group and which one is control group. The second characteristic is control, refer to the use of control group and controlling the effect of extraneous variable on the dependent variable in which the researcher is interested. Both experimental and control group are equal except in the treatment. So when you actually select the sample, the subject, and you assign them into groups, we really hope that the extraneous variable also will be controlled. Why is that? Because what happened in group experimental will be happen also in group control, except the experimented variables. The third characteristic is manipulation, experimental treatment or intervention. So we have so-called experimental treatment and control treatment to consist control of the independent variable by the researcher through treatment or intervention to observe its effect on the dependent variable. Now, the manipulation, actually, there are sometimes when we have two variables, experimented and control, we should understand the two techniques of, when it is technique of teaching, for instance, the two techniques should be the best practice. When we say technique A and technique B, so we should compare in the experimental research the best practice of technique A and the best practice of technique B. So sometimes the people use the term traditional technique, conventional technique, and they just go to the classroom, they observe how the teacher use the technique and use that one as a control variables. And actually, in experimental study, we try to compare the two techniques should be in their best practices. The best practice of technique A, the best practice of technique B. Okay, we start the type of the design, right? So the main characteristic of true experimental design is R. R stands for randomization. It means we assign the subject into either treatment group or control group. They have the equal chance to be there. And then for this one, the group actually has a pretest before the treatment, and after the treatment, we have the post-test. And the effect of the experimental treatment equals to observation 2 minus observation 1, and then observation 4 minus observation 3. That's minus, right? Minus. Okay, so if we look at here, experimental group tested before and after the treatment, and also control group tested in the same way, and includes random assignment to groups. Now, the effect of extraneous variable is assumed to be the same in both groups. So when we have got the experimental group and control group, the extraneous variable actually have been controlled by that way, because what happened in the treatment group will happen also in control group. So do run race of testing effect. Now the second one, post-test only control group. The main difference between the second one with the first one, only the absence of pretest. So in this case, actually, after we randomize into the two groups, we have only post-test. Now, the next one here, factorial design. In this one, actually, there are, you see, there are also, it is also randomized. We have 4 groups. but not 4 different groups, but here you see instructional type in class and online. And we try to look at the factors. Factors one, actually only 1.5 hour per week, or 3 hours per week, and 3 hours per week. That's the level of factors. We are going to compare the effect of in-class versus online class when we teach them 1.5 hours per week and 3 hours per week. Now, in our EFL, beside the time here, we sometimes use the level from the motivation and other psychological aspect of the effect of technique of teaching A, technique of teaching B, to the high motivated student and lower motivated student. Okay, the next one, we have randomized block design. This one. In this one, actually, the random assignment treatment to experimental and control group, you see here also with randomization, test unit broken into similar block or groups according to extraneous variable, in this case, university student and full-time workers. But we also can have location, age, gender, income, and education. The next one, Solomon for group design. Okay, combine the pretest post-test with control group design and the post-test only with control group design. So the combination, combine the two. So the effect of independent variables, we can see from O2 minus O4, and the effect of pretesting, the effect of pretesting and measuring, the effect of random assignment. So we can see not only the effect of independent variables, but we can see also the effect of pretesting, the effect of pretesting and measuring, the effect of random assignment. Excuse me for a couple of minutes. Sorry. Okay. So there's the type of true experimental design. Actually, the main characteristics is randomization, and also control. And the next one is treatment. Now we are moving on to quasi-experimental design. The quasi-experimental design actually is almost similar to true experimental design, except that in quasi-experimental design, we don't have any possibility to do randomization. For instance, in the classroom, when the researcher go to school, and then we found out that the student actually has been in permanent groups. So in this case, we cannot use true experimental design. We are using quasi-experimental design. So the next one. So a quasi-experimental design do not use random assignment. That's the reason. And then comparison group and control groups are often used in quasi-experiment. Matching is a way of improving the comparability of experimental and comparison group. And quasi-experimental design and pre-experimental design are often used when the experimental design are impractical. Quasi-experimental and pre-experimental design may be easier to carry out, but lack of rigor of true experiment. So quasi-experimental is easier because in school, for instance, we have got the permanent groups. So we just need to probably apply the pre-test, and later on by using statistics, we try to look at the differences by looking at the contribution of the pre-test to the post-test. Okay. Quasi-experimental design are almost identical. That's what I have said earlier. And then the key ingredient is that random assignment of subjects, lacking one key ingredient, random assignment of subject. So for instance, one entire class section is used as a treatment group, while another class section is used as a control group. Okay, so the two groups may be non-equivalent. Equivalent means really the same. So if you look at here, they are almost similar. We just change the name to non-equivalent group design. So this is non-equivalent group design. We have also pre-test and post-test. And then for non-equivalent switch replication design, and we have proxy test design. For proxy test design, it looks like as if there is a pre-test and post-test. But for this one, actually, for pre-test, 1 or 2 is not the real pre-test, but the score is taken probably from the grade in the last semester. So the researcher do not have an opportunity to do the pre-test. Say, for instance, it is the new subject. For instance, when you teach English for the first time in junior high school for the first class. So it is impossible for us to teach them to give the free test. So what you're going to do actually to take their grade, probably the average of their grade as the pre-test. And the next one, we have separate pre-test and post-test sample design. Okay, and we have regression continuity design, but we can see here that students who are lagging behind on standardized test score may be selected for remedial curriculum program intended to improve their performance, while those who score high on such tests are not selected from the remedial program. So when we try to divide the groups into two, the probably now we have so-called first one, nilai batas minimum, ya, minimum pencapaian. So probably we group them into two, those below the KKM and above the KKM. So we try to apply the techniques. We are going to look at the effect of the experimented one on either those group below and above. Okay, the next one. This is advantages. Probably we read this the advantages and disadvantages of the design. Now we move on to the next group, the next category, pre-experimental design. The main characteristics of pre-experimental design is do not adequately control for the problems associated with loss of external and internal validity, cannot be classified as true experiment, often used in exploratory research. So example of pre-experimental design are one-shot design, one group pre-test post-test design, and static group. I think nowadays, now when we are doing our experiment in online learning, probably it is very suggestible to use pre-experimental design. Why is that? The first one, probably we need to explore first. Explore which technique works in online learning, and then we try to develop the technique until we come up to the best practice of the technique, and then we publish that one, and the other researcher also will publish the same result. After we have got this, later we compare. So what is one-shot design, one group pre-test post-test design, and static group design? Let's see the first one, one-shot design. A single measure is recorded after the treatment is administered. Okay, study lack any comparison and control of external influences. No measure of test unit not exposed to the experimental treatment may be the only viable choice in test diagram, and then is diagram as experimental and observation. Okay, so there is no control at all. No control, but he just tried to look at the effect of this one in, they observe only in the post-test. So the second one group pre-test post-test design. Okay, we have actually some variation. Here we have pre-test and then experimental treatment, post-test. And we actually may develop this one into experimental treatment 2, post-test 3, experimental 3, post-test 4, post-test 3, right? Okay. And static group design, after only design with control group. Experimental group is measured after being exposed to the experimental treatment. So control group is measured without having been exposed to the experimental treatment. No pre-measure is taken. The major weakness is lack of assurance that the group were equal on variables of interest prior to the treatment, because there's no pre-test, just post-test, right? Okay, I think that's my discussion about the design. But beside the design, actually, we have several other topics related to this experimental research, such as about population and sample, instrumentation, research procedure, hypothesis testing, and generalization. Now, the issue about the population and sample in experimental research actually is that the equality, I mean, the population and sample, I mean the representativeness. The population, the sample actually should be the representation of the population. Okay, the characteristic of sample, we call this one accessible population, is equal to the characteristics of the target population. In other words, sample is representation of the target population. To increase the representativeness of the sample, probably sampling is used. Probably for all of us who have studied the educational research, then we know that sampling can be simple random sampling, again, stratified random sampling, cluster random sampling, systematic random sampling. Okay. How to do this one? Actually, there are the procedures, right? And the second issue, the instrumentation. So beside the subject, there should be representation of the target population. Then the instrumentation also is very important. Why is that? Because the instrument for experimental research should be developed, should be validated before we go to the field. So when you write the proposal, you need to validate your instrument in advance. So what is the validity and what is the reliability? If you look at here, the validity is the extent to which the instrument measures what is supposed to measure and perform as it is designed to perform. So when it is in teaching, for instance, the instrument, when it is related to students' achievement, we actually look at the rubric, whether actually the question actually cover all the items in the rubrics. And also we have statistical tests to check the validity. When the instrument actually is objective test, we can use statistical tests to check the quality. And reliability also, that's about the consistency. Does the instrument consistently measure what is it intended to measure? So we have inter-rater observer reliability. When it is for speaking, for instance, we need the rater because we cannot use objective test for this one. Then there should be inter-rater reliability. We have also test-retest reliability. Test one, and then it test again. We look at whether it is consistent, result consistent, parallel form reliability, and internal consistency reliability. Then,
I'm sorry, Dr. Hamzah. We have a limited time. Can you make it shorter? And then there are some questions, many questions in the chat box asking how to do the experimental research online.
Okay, thank you. Probably we just skip this one. Since the time is very limited, we are going to talk about experimental research online. Thank you. How many minutes left, Pak Nurwanto?
Maybe 5-10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so doing experimental research online, there are many terminologies used actually for experimental research online. I mean, online learning. We start from that one. Online learning. You need this one if you want to search the article online. The online learning actually also the terminology use e-learning, virtual learning, distance education, M-learning, MOOC, learning management system, LMS. And online learning should not be confused with the concept of blended learning. So if you search the information on the internet, you will see that there's also blended learning. So some part is online, some part is actually face-to-face. But when we talk about online learning, actually that's different from this one. So this is not the fusion of face-to-face and online learning. Okay, I try to find the information about the studies, the research that people have done actually on online learning. I found out that most of the theories are coming from distance education because COVID-19 actually is only one semester. We actually have been affected by the COVID-19 one semester. So probably the research, experimental research in online learning has not been published yet, still ongoing. We know from the research to publication also need 1 semester or 1 year. But this is from online learning. This is the categories, the classification of the studies conducted in online learning from 2009 to 2018. It is published in 2020. Okay, they try to collect 248 articles published in reputable international journals. This is the classification. If you look at here, case study, design-based research, logistic regression, qualitative research, grounded theory, extent research, structural equation models, empirical research, mixed method, and then we have quasi-experimental. So the studies, experimental studies online, actually only this portion, empirical. This is empirical actually when we go to look at the article, sometimes correlation also they put into empirical research. So quasi-experimental, only very small portion here, small portion. So it means that up to now, the people actually, the only experimental research is actually have the small proportion. But if you look at the others, actually they try to combine the experimental like mixed method, right? Okay, empirical research also they have one. But most of the study is case study. So probably even though we discuss now about the experimental research online, probably we need to look at the facts that only few studies are experimental online. So most of them are case study. That's the most used methodological concept, observational case study, where there is no intervention and case in describing based on activities, and also intervention case study. And they have another type of research, so-called structural equation modeling, and also logical regression. Okay, there is also called design-based research. I think it is good for us, lecturer, teacher, involved in design-based research because we try to design the resources actually which are good to apply in our teaching environment. Okay, this is empirical research. There's just like experimental research. And the other one is grounded theory, external research, and qualitative quasi-experimental one. Now, what is the key finding on online learning? Probably you need to read this one. But we we are going to look at several examples. I just actually got 2 examples of the experimental research conducted online. Okay. A further review of experimental and quasi-experimental studies that contrasted different types of online learning practices found as the following. Study contrasts blended and purely online. Of course, that's not what you're going to do. Elements such as video and online quizzes do not appear to influence the amount that students learn on online class. Online learning can be enhanced by giving learners control in their interaction with media and prompting learners' reflection. When groups of students are learning together online, support mechanisms such as guiding questions generally influence the way students interact, but not the amount they learn. So let us actually, we need this one as a guidance when we are doing the experimental studies online. Okay. Let's see the example, right? We are going to look at two examples, how the people do the experimental research online. The first one actually is done by Linsen and G. Panatswantep in 2012. The title is E-Learning Constructive Role Plays for EFL Learners in China's Tertiary Education, Asian Reference Journal. So what is our research question? The research question, does constructive role play have any positive effect on improving the speaking performance of the student with different level of proficiency? The second one, what are the second year non-English major student opinion of e-learning constructive role plays in their college English speaking classes? And then the participant divided into two groups, experimental group and control group. The duration is for 18 weeks. There is a design is pre-test, post-test, control group design. They can use control group design because, pre-test, post-test, control group design because they have a possibility to regroup the student because that's online. Okay, this is the result. The research procedure, constructive roles play, process, behavioristic role plays in e-learning. The result is on speaking performance. This is the experimental group and control group. If you look at here, the effect of an experimental group, we can see the very significant difference. There's a significant at 0.00. And in control group, actually, it is not significant. This is 0.842. Okay, so, but in this study, they didn't compare the posters of experimental group and control group. So they didn't compare. If we apply the true experimental design, what we are going to compare actually is post-test of experimental group, minus by post-test of control group design, control group, sorry. This is one example. Another example comes from Indonesia. I think this is done by student. Yeah, I don't know whether this is one or two. The effectiveness of online playing storytelling card on student vocabulary mastery, an experimental research at SMAN2 Bengkulu, Journal of English Language Teaching, volume 9 and volume 3. And this is what they actually did. The purpose of the research is to find out whether or not online playing storytelling card is effective on student vocabulary mastery at SMAN2 Bengkulu. The participant is 200. Oh, sorry. Oh no, I'm sorry. I forgot to change the participants. Duration is 10 weeks. 10 weeks. And research design, pre-experimental research design with one group pre-test, post-test design. The research procedure, online playing storytelling card. The result actually show that vocabulary mastery. We look at here, they try to use the pair differences between pre-test and post-test 1, pre-test and post-test 2, pre-test and post-test 3. So this is the result. Actually, so significant using two-tailed test. There is a difference between the result and post-test, and significantly difference. Okay, this is the two examples. So probably for us, I try to find what are going to have in our online learning. Probably we start from developing the resources first, and then testing these resources. So for this purpose, probably pre-experimental design is more handy, more practical, instead of quasi-experimental design and true experimental design. Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation, and then we go back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hamzah. All the participants, we have got the presentations from Dr. Hamzah that I can I can conclude. We start from the differences between research and non-research. The contribution to knowledge differentiate research and non-research. And then Dr. Hamzah also suggested that I think the most practical one to do the experimental research online is pre-experimental research. Maybe it answers some questions of the participants. And then the next presenters is Dr. Rwandi, who will discuss the correlational research. And also, Dr. Rwandi will also discuss how to do the online research on correlational research, correlational study. I mean, let me inform you, Dr. Rwandi is the head department of master degree on Islamic education. And then for the education from Dr. Rwandi, undergraduate was from University of Tidar Magelang, and then master degree from University of Gajah Mada, and then PhD from Universitas Negeri Yogyakarta. Pak Radwi, you will have around 30 minutes to discuss and to present your paper, and then we will have another 30 minutes for question and answer. Pak Radwi, you may start now. Okay, everyone, Pak Rwandi is preparing for the PowerPoint, trying to share the PowerPoint first. Just we can wait a moment for Pak Rwandi. The thing that we can learn from experimental research shared by Dr. Hamzah is that actually we can do some design of experimental research, because some example given by Dr. Hamzah inform us that it can be we can use control group and experimental group online, but the most suggested experimental research by Dr. Hamzah is the pre-experimental, because it's most practical. So maybe next year we will have so many paper on pre-experimental research, and so we can compare each other. Okay, I think the next part is ready for the discussion on the correlation research design in ELT. Okay. Great. Okay, Pak Rwandi will start the presentation.
All right. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wal aqibatul muttaqin. Assalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajmain amma ba'd. The Excellency, the Dean of Teacher Training and Education Faculty, Prof. Mansur, the Excellency, the Head of English Department of IAIN Salatiga, Pak Norwanto PhD, and the Excellency, the first presenter, Pak Hamzah from Universitas Negeri Padang, all participants, Bapak, Ibu, from I see from around Indonesia. First of all, I'd like to invite you all to thank Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala because of His Hidayah, Rahmah, and Taufik. We are able to meet virtually through Zoominar held by English Department of FTIGA, Teacher Training Education Faculty of IAIN Salatiga. And then the following salawat and salam must be upon to Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam because of his guidance we're able to come into the bright situation. Well, my concern in this Zoominar is correlational research design in ELT. I think Pak Hamzah has given a lot philosophical and also epistemological views concerning quantitative research. So I'd like to focus on my presentation on methodological view. Therefore, I only have a few slides to discuss in this opportunity. And then first of all, I'd like to start from the first slide, introductions. Please remember that research is only the ways, one of the ways. And I think Pak Hamzah has given reasons that there are many ways to solve problems, not only just through research, but we're able to use intuitions, philosophy, religion, and so on. So research is not the only one. Remember this. Yeah. Therefore, if somebody says that research is the only one, it is absolutely naive or wrong. Yeah. Therefore, research is one of the choices. The second, through research, the solutions of the problems might be more scientific and methodological. Yeah, this means that we should be objective, we should be empirical, we should be analytical, we should be critical, and so on. So it will be more scientific. And also through research, we are able to solve problems more methodological. Yeah, because we should follow certain procedures from considering problems, whether we start from observation and then analysis and the signs, the symptoms in educational sphere or perhaps in society. And then we continue to identify the problems, propose the problems or state the problems and follow to the other procedure of the research. So it is more methodological. Well, and the next one, two research paradigms can be chosen, quantitative and qualitative. Again, remember that there are two main paradigms. I do not talk about mixed method because actually the birth of mixed method is a solution to cope with the weaknesses in quantitative and qualitative paradigms. But the questions, if we use mixed method, there is no weakness anymore? Of course not. Yeah, therefore, actually quantitative and qualitative are the main paradigms in research circumstances. Therefore, each of which may have its strengths as well as its weaknesses. Please remember, so don't be the mainstream supporters. When you study quantitative and then we underestimate qualitative, or conversely, when we becomes the supporters of qualitative, and then we underestimate quantitative. Again, please remember that each of it might have its strengths as well as its weaknesses. Yeah, there is no something perfect in the world. So even though we have conducted such kinds of procedure in research, there must be weakness in our research. Well, and then the choice of it, whether we want to choose quantitative or qualitative, must based on the need of the researcher. For instance, if we are going to understand the ideas of local wisdom, it is impossible to use quantitative. It is impossible to understand the grassroots ideas concerning the culture in Padang, for example, if we just use quantitative. We can only able to investigate the ideas of our society, the grassroots, by using qualitative. And then we should ban the use of quantitative. All right, the next slide. In quantitative paradigm, as said by Pak Hamzah previously, there are two main quantitative researches which can be chosen. The first one is experimental, and then I think there have been a lot given by Pak Hamzah, whether you want to choose the pre-experimental, true experimental, or quasi-experimental, depends on our need or our necessity. And then the second one is non-experimental researches. In non-experimental researches, there are descriptive or perhaps survey, or probably we are able to choose correlational study. And then if we choose descriptive or survey, and then you understand that in Indonesian public sphere, survey is very important now, even though sometimes a person just underestimate the survey, but you know, in elections of the president, of the local government, survey is useful here. So don't underestimate survey, including descriptive. Moreover, experimental or correlational study. Again, that each of the method has its strengths as well as weaknesses. And then it is our job to anticipate the weakness by using several validity and reliability tests. For example, if you use that. And then in qualitative, of course, we choose different validity and reliability tools. A non-inferential statistic is used in descriptive, non-inferential, and then in survey. And then if we focus on in correlative study or correlational study, we use inferential statistic. This means that the result of the calculations by statistic should be treated to all the population considered here. And then following, there are several paradigms, but in this case, I'd like to use one of the experts in research methodology. I take from Meredith Gold, taken in from page 319, that the aims of correlational study are to predict or to understand the causal patterns. Perhaps another paradigm says that correlational study can be used in other business, but it is so. And then various correlational statistics are available to estimate the strength of the prediction or relationship. Yeah, we are able to use product moment. We are able to use regressions as said by Pak Hamzah, by using ANOVA and so on. By using SAM, yeah, and then by using path analysis, depend on, again, the level of discussion or the level of the units discussed, we are going to share to others. Yeah, so we are able to choose different statistics to do so. And then the level of analysis within correlational study depends on the purpose, of the researchers here. And then the analysis may include to test the underlying theories used by using path analysis. For example, if you join in S3 degree, and then you should make a dissertation, by using path analysis, you are able to test the theories used in your study. But this is not my concern because we only focus on S1 degree in this seminar. All right, and then I'd like to start from causal relationship study as said or proposed by Gall in the research design. The example is that the correlation study of motivation and English achievement, blah, 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 for example, of the first or the second, the 11 year students of blah, blah, blah. And then I like to propose two problems here. Does the relationship between motivation and English achievement of the, for example, 11 students of SMA Negeri 1 Salatiga exist? And then the second problems I try to exemplify. Does the significant relationship between motivation and English achievement of the 11 students of SMA Negeri Salatiga exist? And then I continue to instrument and data collection method. The instruments in this research can be two, non-test and test. And then in non-test, we are able to choose questionnaire to measure motivation as an independent variable symbolized by X. And then the steps are, for example, observe, define the theories of motivation. And then I think Pa Hamza has reviewed that in quantitative study, the strength of the findings depend on our comprehension in the theories used here. Please remember this. So in quantitative study, especially in correlational study, just move from the idea that we use another researcher, for example, by using variable X and Y, and then another researcher by using variable A and B, and then we collect, or perhaps plagiarize. Stop this. So try to observe carefully, conscientiously, the theories as the basis of our research, especially in quantitative study. And then the second, construct the questionnaire based upon them. If we find the indicators in the theories and also sub-indicators, and then try to compose the questionnaire. And the next one, try out the questionnaire to understand the validity and reliability of it. As explained previously, that the construct of instrument must be valid from the very beginning in quantitative study. We could not change the design in the field of the study in quantitative. It's different from qualitative. In qualitative, it's flexible. For instance, in the first meeting, there are a lot of information haven't taken yet. Then we might come into the second meeting. It is qualitative, but in quantitative, stop this. So from the very beginning, the design must be valid. And I think this has been explained by Pak Hamza. And then the last, use the valid and reliable questionnaire to measure the motivation. Or perhaps, especially in this pandemic, for Corona pandemic, using the available questionnaire taken from reputable journal is recommended if you want. But if it is possible and for you, for us, it is easy, we are able to try out this to understand the validity and reliability of the questionnaire. And then the second non-test instrument, document, is used to understand English achievement record. We call dependent variable symbolized by way, or perhaps if it is not available, we are able to test the students by achievement tests used to measure English achievement. So it is just optional. Yeah, optional. By using document is okay, or perhaps if it is not available, we need to test this. And then the following, the third one is data analysis. The collected data is analyzed by using Pearson product moment formula, because we just to understand the correlation, the relation between X and Y. That's it. Yeah. And then the interpretation, we are able to understand the direction, whether it is positive or negative, and then also correlation coefficient showing the strength starting from the very weak and the poor, and then fair, and then high, and then perfect. Yeah, but on the perfect relationship is sometimes impossible to do. Yeah. And then the second, we are able to understand the significance of the correlation. There are two ways. Yeah, there are two ways. We are able to use the arithmetical calculation, or perhaps by using the significant value. And then it has been also reviewed by Pak Hamza. And then if we use a table, of course, we need to compare between RSQ, yeah, or we call correlation coefficient, and then comparing by R table here, or perhaps by using significant value, or perhaps by using two of which it is okay. Yeah, in my point of view. Yeah. And then the second of the correlational study can be prediction. I have a simple example, the influence of what's that? English placement test towards English achievement. And then I offer problems. Does the significant relationship between English placement test and English achievement test of, and then I give you example previously of the 11-year students of SMA Negeri Salatiga exist. And the second, does English placement test significantly influence English achievement? Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And then the second, data collection method. Yeah, the data collection method by using non-test documents used to understand English achievement, because it is usually conducted at the entry, the entry test, yeah, before students join in the school, for example, yeah, symbolized by X, and then English achievement symbolized by Y. Yeah. And the second, by using tests, summative tests used to understand English achievement if the document is unavailable. But if both are available, it is easier. For example, the English placement test is available over there, and then the data concerning the score of English achievement is available over there. Just ask the teacher, yeah, ask permission to have such kinds of data, and then analyze. Of course, the level of analysis improve from just correlation study by using regression. And then by using regression, we are able to understand the first one, the direction of the relationship, plus or minus, the strength of the relationship showed by correlation coefficient, medium, high, perfect, and then the significance of the relationship, yeah, by two-tail versus significant value 0.05. And then the contribution of independent variable to the dependent ones in percents. Yeah. And the second, the linearity, when con F higher than F table, and the significance of the regression, because it is just two variables here. Yeah, perhaps if we have three variables, depend on the policy of the institution, the institution. Yeah, or by using the regression significant value, and then the level is 0.05. And then the strength of the influence when what's that? T calculations is lower than T table. And the significance of influence if, for example, the value is lower than significant value 0.05. And regression equation meaning the increase of V that can be predicted from X variable is blah, blah, blah. Or perhaps in this case, we might find different ideas to this case, because sometimes the significance is leveling. We are able to use F calculations if the number of variables more than 2. Yeah, and also we are able to use T calculations if what's that, the variables is only what's that, 2. Well, and then how to conduct correlational study, especially in Corona-19 pandemic. Yeah, because correlational study is ex post facto. I mean that the facts have happened. We just measure the result of the facts. So it is called ex post facto, that the facts has happened. It is different from experimental. I think experimental is, in this case, is more difficult rather than correlational in case of the research methodology. So no manipulation is made. So the researcher just needs to measure the facts. For example, when you want to measure the student motivation and English achievement, this means that before students sit in in achievement test, they have motivation. So the job of the researcher just to measure what has happened. Yeah, for instance, if a researcher would like to understand the relationship between vocabulary mastery and reading comprehension, and then I give a simple example, the correlations between vocabulary mastery and reading comprehensions of blah, 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 blah. And then the steps are, the first one, of course, starting from permission, and then it can be, it can be finished, it can be taken virtually if it is possible, or students or researcher might come to school. Find out the document of vocabulary test as the independent variable stimulus by X. Yeah. Tested by the concerning teacher in the concerning schools of the samples used if it is available. If it is not available, conduct the vocabulary test. So it is simple. Yeah, I gave you example of the sample here. Yeah, just 10 students, and then the score 7, 8, and so on. And then the second, find out the document of reading comprehension as the dependent variable symbolized by way. Tested by tested by concerning teacher of the sample used if it is available, unless if it is not available, conduct reading comprehension test. So again, that correlational study is simpler than experimental given by Pak Hamzah. And then again, the score of A, 7, and so on. After that, analyze, depend on the level of analysis. And then if we discuss this, of course, we need to understand the policy of the institution. Yeah, perhaps a certain institution just ask or demand students to understand the correlation. It's okay, it doesn't matter. Or perhaps the institution increase or improve from just understanding the correlation until understanding the functional relationship. So rather than using correlational analysis, then improve into regression and so on. Yeah. And then after everything is finished, just report. Therefore, again, that correlational study is simpler rather than experimental study. But I think this is based on my experience I have had so far. And then more discussion can be conducted after the discussions. Thank you, Pak Nurwanto, as moderator. That's all. Ya, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Rwandi. That's the interesting discussions on correlation research. Let me highlight a moment that the first sessions from Dr. Hamzah, we got the basic understanding of research and also practical way to do the experimental research. And then Pak Rwandi, discussed the practical ways to do the correlational studies. I may conclude one thing that maybe Dr. Hamzah or Dr. Rwandi, maybe you will agree or not, just that actually there will be no bigger differences between online or offline research methodologically. The differences are only how to collect the data. And online research, we can collect the data online through what's so-called online classes or uses the online media and etc. That's the thing that I can conclude, simple conclusion from this one. Maybe Dr. Hamzah and Dr. Rwandi, maybe you can give highlight on this one. Okay, and there are some questions, so many questions about the experimental research and correlational research. Let me read some questions for both Pak Hamzah and Pak Rwandi. Okay, the first from Pak Irfan from Medan. This is for Pak Hamzah. The question is that how to test the validity of a questionnaire when we conduct a survey and only investigate one variable. This is the first question. And the next questions from Audi Yudayani. The question is that this is a general questions that what is the strategy for seeking novelty in quantitative research? The next question also for Mr. Hamzah from Mr. Hanung from Salatiga. Pak Hamzah, think about the statement that experimental research in educational context is not ethical. This is very basic questions and very ethical questions. Once more, there is a statement that experimental research in educational context is not ethical, since from the beginning, experimental research separated students into groups, yeah, discriminate them based on the research purposes. Okay. Maybe Pak Hamzah will answer this one. The next also for Pak Hamzah from Siswoyo Hati. I don't know. This is dear Pak Bambang. I don't know who is Pak Bambang here. Maybe Pak Hamzah means. What should the teacher, lecturer, researcher do then when the result of the research is rejected? Does it mean that the researchers are failed in identifying the language teaching problem and applying the theories to overcome those problems? Thank you. Okay. The next question is from Azizah, but I think we may not answer this one because Bu Faizatul Azizah asked about classroom action research, maybe on the next, on the other discussions of the classroom action research. And then the next from Nurlaila Kadaria for Pak Hamzah also. My main problem when I'm guiding my students about the validity of interviews and questionnaire. Validity of interviews and questionnaire result in getting the data. Meanwhile, the right and the most valid technique must be observation. So in online teaching learning run at school or universities can make them to do the research. How to I, as the advisor, overcome the problems. And then the next for Pak Hamzah also from Pak Safarudin Marpaung from Medan. There are 3 questions. The first is how to conduct quantitative research methodologically in pandemic area. I think Mr. Hamzah has answered this one. And then the second one is about Turnitin, maybe on the other another discussions, yeah, about the similarity checks. Okay, the next question is about how to find out the novelty, just like the previous questions. And then the next also from Bu Nurlaila Kadaria. What kind of experimental research can be done by us as a lecturer? Okay, then I think Pak Hamzah has answered this question on the presentations. The next is questions for Mr. Rawadi from Pak Hanung. My questions to Pak Rawadi, how can we from the beginning ensure that we pick the correct variables in correlational study? As there is a saying that everything seems to correlate one another nowadays. Okay, I think that's the questions that maybe Pak Hamzah and Pak Rawandi address for this one. Let me check on the box. Okay, another questions for Pak Rawandi. Is it okay to correlate nominal data and interval data? For example, learning style and vocabulary mastery. The next from Indah Permata Sari. Oh, just say hello. Hello, Indah. I'm Indah from Tangerang. Okay, hello. And then the next from Fitri Novia. Do we need to measure validity and reliability of instrument when we conduct reading tests for correlation design? The next from Irfan, Pak Irfan Amin Ritonga. Okay, this is just giving proud. Hello, Professor Hamzah. Our family is proud from Medan. Thank you for amazing smooth presentations. Okay. Okay. We are proud of you too, Mr. Irfan. Okay, Pak Dr. Hamzah and Pak Dr. Wadi, you may address the questions in one moment. The first will be Pak Hamzah first, who has a lot of questions. Okay, Pak Hamzah, you may start to answer the questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Nurwanto. Now I'll try to ask the question one by one. Probably I'll start from the question from Irfan from Medan. The question is how to test the validity of the instrument for survey when I have only one variable. Actually, the validity, there are several types of validity. If you look at back on my slide, there are several types of validity, and probably when it is survey, the first thing we need to check is content validity. Content validity, when it is related to some, probably the curriculum, we check whether actually it represents the curriculum. The second one, we have also another way to validate the instrument by using so-called expert judgment. So not necessarily all statistical. You may bring the instrument to the expert on that area, and they will check whether your instrument actually is valid according to your research problems. So, so you can use expert judgment, or you check the content validity or construct validity. Construct validity by checking the items, the question in your survey, instrument and check whether actually it covers all the areas that we're going to see. The second one from Bu Handayani, what is the strategy for seeking a novelty of the research in experimental studies? Actually, this is the very main concern. Normally, the student come to us with the title. So this is the title for my proposals. And normally, when they come to me, I will ask them to check whether the problem they try to raise actually is novel or not. So how to do that one? I ask them to copy and print, copy and print out and read 20 or 30 research articles published in journals related to their topic, addressing the topic or the sub-area of the topic. So by summarizing the 20 or 3 articles, and then we come up to the idea what has been studied by the people. So we know what had been studied by the researcher in the area, and from what had been studied, later on we can see what have not been studied. So what have not been studied actually can be regarded as novel topic. So it means the people haven't studied this topic yet in this area, so it is new, novel. It will contribute a lot to the theory, development of the theory in that area. So this is the strategy. Ask the student to read and copy 20 to 30 recent articles in that area. And from that one, we will see what has been studied and what has not been studied. What has not been studied, haven't been studied actually are regarded as the novel topic, as the novelty. The next one from Hanung, experimental research is not ethical because the researchers spread the subject into groups, so there will be discrimination. Well, in teaching, probably in education, in teaching actually we have always grouping. If you go to school, the student has been in groups, right? So I think there is no issue on discrimination in this case. The most important one is that what you put as an experimental variable and the control variable, the independent variable you use always the best practice. So you try to compare the best practice 1 and the best practice 2. So all the two groups actually will receive the best practice, but we are going to look at to compare the best practice and the best practice, which one is more, is better. So normally in experimental research, we try to find something better. So it means the two variables are good and acceptable. So that's why actually when the student use the control variable as traditional method or conventional method, we need to check. So what method they mean by conventional? They say sometimes this is the method conducted by used by the teacher in the classroom. We need to check the theory because in experimental study, we compare the theory, we test whether theory 1 actually is better than theory 2. So theory, it means when we use the teaching procedure, the teaching procedure should be actually as suggested by the theories, not used by the teacher in the classroom only. Okay, the next one. What happens if the hypothesis is rejected? Actually, this is our main job actually, to verify or to confirm the theory, to verify or to confirm, to verify or falsify the theory. So if our research actually reject the working hypothesis, it means we falsify the theory that we test. So that's good. I always encourage the students who have courage to write their thesis when the research actually reject the working hypothesis. I say that's pretty good if you make the report, because there's a tendency that the student actually try to prove that the hypothesis is is true. So they try to make their research report actually suggest the working hypothesis. But we have two tasks actually. We either it is to prove or to falsify, to reject, accept or reject. So there is no problem if the hypothesis is rejected, just write the report. But in the discussion, you need to discuss a little bit longer, because you need to also explain why it is rejected. Okay, so that's the key, right? So write the report. It means you finish your thesis, your scriptsy. So you don't need to do the research again. Aziza, and he asked me about the car. So classroom excellent research. This is not our topic today. Probably there will be another meeting for this one. Laila Kadaria, this is about validity of the interview and questionnaire. Validity of the interview and questionnaire. As probably the same answer to Irfan, the interview and questionnaire, firstly, we look at the construct validity. Construct validity, we check whether the questions we use actually has covered all aspects of the variables that we are going to study. And actually, the second one, we use expert judgment. Expert judgment, we go to the expert in the field, not only ordinary people, expert in the field. We ask them to check whether our instrument actually has been valid according to the construct of the variables. And the next one, Sapardin Marpau, how to conduct the experimental research in pandemic, in pandemic COVID-19. Okay, as we have discussed earlier, actually, there are problems if we use true and quasi-experimental design, because normally for true experimental design, we test the theory 1 and theory 2. And we need to have the established theory. We find that in the literature and we compare. And probably the theory, we can apply some theories from face-to-face classroom interaction. But for some cases now, the main problem is we actually have little knowledge about the online learning and resources. So probably we start from the one. To develop the resources, to develop the also the instrument, to choose the platform, which platform actually is good for speaking, for reading, writing, and then we try to think about how to improve. I mean, to improve so that we can have the best practice of using this platform. So for these purposes, probably the first stage we are going to do is to do pre-experimental research, because the main purpose of pre-experimental actually is exploratory. So there are two main purposes, exploratory, and the second one is explanatory. For true experiment and quasi-experiment, normally that's for explanatory, to explain. But exploratory is to explore. We try to explore which one actually, which techniques actually is very effective, is very useful in online learning. So that's, I think, the good idea. Now you try to involve also in design-based research, right? We design the procedures, and then we try to do the experiment about the effect of these procedures. And then how to find the novelty? I think the same question we have been discussed earlier. And then experimental research for lecturers. Actually, that's it. I think we have discussed this also. I think that's my explanation about the question. Thank you very much. Go back to the moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Hamzah. I'd like to remind all the participants that to get the certificate of participants, that you have to fill the attendance. So Bu Nur Mutmainah will share the link for the attendance soon, very soon. Now she is preparing for that one, and I hope that later you all could fill the link, could click the link. The next questions, some questions for Mr. Rwandi, and there are some additional questions the last minute. And I think Pak Rwandi has got the answer. Okay, Pak Rwandi, you may answer the questions.
Well, thank you very much, Pak Norwanto. The first, and I think this is the very beginning problem after COVID-19. They changed everything, including the way of researching. Well, I think a lot has been explained by Pak Hamzah. The first one, when we are going to conduct virtual research, of course we should have networking. And then as the common situation, we need to have permission. And then we should need help from teachers, from the headmaster. For instance, if we are going to measure the student motivation, ask the school, ask the headmaster, ask the teacher to help us to do so. So I think it's better if we have a lot network to school around us. The second problem or questions asked by Pak Hanung, how to make sure that everything is valid and reliable in our research. I think as I have shared before, Pak Hanung, the first one, we are able to use the ideas of Kerlinger. Sometimes we call Max Mingson. The first one, especially in correlative study, we should try to optimize the variance we observe here. By what? First, we need to ask students to understand the theory, whether the theory is taken from teaching learning process. And then at least the students should understand the pedagogy, psychology, linguistic, especially in the English department. But the problem is that, do the students understand that? It is the problem. For example, when we talk about theories of learning, there are a lot of variables influencing the student achievement. It can be from microsystem, from family, from friend, from chronosystem, from media, from macrosystem in the terms of politics, from mesosystem, from gadget, from exosystem and so on. The question is that, do students understand the theories given by lectures? It is the problem. So to make sure our correlational study, first of all, optimize the variance, variable we research through the theories, taken from lectures or perhaps outside of the lectures. The first one. And the second, and then it can be taken from the book written by Kerlinger, 1998. The second, minimize the variant errors. And then by applying valid random sampling, and it is also explained by Pak Hamzah. So be careful when we randomize the sample and the population. So the sample must be homogeneous. Why? Because if the sample is heterogeneous, the bias is bigger rather than the perfect one or the true one. And the last one, by controlling the excluded variance by using statistical calculations. Of course, if we have used the three of them and there is still bias, perhaps we are able to investigate the other factors. But I think if we methodologically using mechanism techniques, the first one is by optimize the variance research. The second, minimize the errors and control by using statistical calculation. Yeah, perhaps it is better. And then we are able to, avoid, the wrong process of investigation. So actually, there has been a tools to do so, Pak Anung. And then, as I said before, the ideas can be read from the books written by Kerlinger, 1998. Well, the second, it is possible to correlate learning style and vocabulary mastery. Why not? Yeah, it is very possible. Yeah, because learning style is psychological dimension. And then we are going, first of all, we are going to do so by reading conscientiously the theory of learning style, whether the students tend to be visual, auditory, or perhaps eclectic, or perhaps blended, and so on and so on. And then identify the indicator and the sub-indicator, propose the questionnaire, and so on, until tryout and so on. After that, yeah, just correlate between learning style as independent variable and vocabulary mastery as dependent variable. The third one, what is the third one? If we use document, if I wasn't wrong, if you use document, for example, document of the test, what is about the validity? Okay, I think before teacher testing the students or test the student, there must be a lot of processes to do so. The first one, constructing test instrument, and the instrument must be analyzed. After that, try out the instrument, and then calculate the validity and the variability of the test, and so on. So, in this case, we are able to be sure that actually the test conducted by teacher, yeah, has been staged from several stages, and one of them is by trying out the instrument. So by using document, one job can be avoided from this. For what? For composing instrument, and then analyzing instrument, and then trying out the instrument and calculating the validity and reliability. But if it is not available, we should test. So we have another job. We should, we should compose the instrument based on the curriculum, based on the material, and then perhaps we consult with the experts concerning our focus in our study, and then we need to to try it out and so on. So using document is easier rather than we conduct tests by ourselves. Well, the last one is concerning novelty. Again, to find out the novelty, especially in correctional study, we need to observe clearly by observing the theories, and we make clear the key terms over there, which might be different from the previous researches. Yeah, for instance, when you are going to research the student ability to compose narrative text, make sure that the students have experience to do so. Yeah, it must be sure that don't investigate the ability of composing narrative text, but the students have not experienced that. It will be biased. Or it is better if you understand that before the other genres are possessed by student, make sure that the student absolutely understand the genre, the narrative text. Yeah, the same. If you want to investigate the traditional society, yeah, just focus on the traditional society and make sure what does it mean by traditional society. So it is important to understand the theory of the traditional society to avoid the bias. Okay, and the following, what else, Panur? What else? the last one. It is possible to correlate between correlating the use of technique, media, and method. Yeah, of course, it is possible in terms of English achievement. Yeah, even though it's rather not sure. Why? Because there are still several alternatives to do so rather than to use the technique, media, and method. I think the use of technique, media, and method is better in experimental study. Yeah. If you was that forced to do so, to use this one, you force something which is not in the right place. Yeah. So the use of technique, media, and method are better in experimental study rather than in correlative study. What else, Pak? That's it? Okay, thank you, Pak Nur.
Thank you, Pak Ruwadi. For Dr. Hamza, I think we have another additional 2 questions. Maybe you can give more 5 or 10 minutes to answer the questions. But before that one, I'd like to remind all the participants that Bu Nur Mutmainah has shared the link for the PPT and also the link for the attendance. Please click the link and fill the form. Then inshallah we will send the certificate of participants. Another 2 questions for Dr. Hamza. If there are 2 classes, class A and class B, want to conduct quasi-experimental research, can I just simply use class A as the experimental group and class B as a control group? Is yes, should they have quite similar pretest average score? Thank you. And then the second one, the last one, from you, Riyad Son. And then I think this is the question is about who should teach in the experimental class. It should be the researcher, or is it possible to have another teacher to teach the experimental classes? That's the last 2 questions for Pak Hamza. Okay, please, Pak Hamza.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start from the first question. We actually have got the 2 groups, Group A and Group B in quasi-experimental design. The question is it okay if the researcher just decide Group A as an experimental group and Group B as a control group? The main features of experimental actually is randomization, not only randomization of subject, but also randomization of groups. So you need to random. That's pretty simple actually, just toss the coin, right? So if this side up, then Group A will be experimental class. If the side up, and then the Group A will be control class. So that's pretty simple, but you cannot just choose, okay, I choose Group A as an experimental. We have to have reasons for choosing Group A or Group B, and reason normally based on randomization. So the randomization not only assigning the subject into groups, and deciding the groups also should be randomized, right? And also the first stage, when you derive the subject from the population, also should also use randomization. So you select randomly. So always random from the, to get the subject from the population, random. To assign the subject into group, use randomly. And to assign experimental and control group also should be random. So you cannot just choose, right? The second one, who should teach? Some people actually say the researcher should teach, and the other people say no, when the researcher teach can be biased. But I think for me myself, I think the researcher should teach the classes, because actually he knows what is the best practice for the techniques he used in the classroom. And if it is done by the other teacher, actually it is very hard to to say that, okay, this is the best practice of technique A. This is the best practice of technique B. But the most important one is that the researcher should have follow the research ethic, right? Research ethics, that he should be fair. The researcher should be fair, treating group, experimental group, and control group. So it means he tried to treat both groups similarly, except in the treatment. The treatment is different. One for control experimental treatment, one control treatment. But others should be equal. I think it is hard for beginners specifically to treat this student like this way, because he tried to prove that his hypothesis actually is accepted. But the researcher actually should not be biased. What we are going to do in experimental actually just to test the theories. So to test the theories, whether it is rejected or accepted. And then we stand on that one. When it is rejected, that's okay, write the report. When it is accepted, write the report, communicating the result. Okay, so I think that's the answer to question 1 and question 2. Okay, so who should teach? The researcher should teach, but the researcher should not be biased. That's the key. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hamzah. That's the last answer. Very simple, that the research should teach, but it should be not biased. Yeah. Okay, then this is the last thing that we should do, that is closing. But before that one, I'd like to remind you once again, please, all participants, you fill the attendance list. Just click the link on the chat box. Okay, then before the closing, I'd like to thanks to Mr. Dean, Professor Mansur. I'd like to thanks to Mr. Hamzah. I'd like to thanks to Mr. Wandi, and I'd like to thanks to all participants, around 200 participants from all over Indonesia, and some say, one say that they are, he or she is from Brazil. Okay, then I hope that we can meet again in another seminar and another topics. Thank you. See you again, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, the last one, please stay there. We will have some screenshot for the documentation, please. Okay, please, everyone. Smile. Ready for Mr. Purnomo? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay, done. Okay, there are so many pages, I think. There are more than 200 people here. The participants here. So Mr. Purnomo takes time to screenshot all the participants here. Just please wait a moment. Okay, all done? Okay, thank you all participants. Mr. Purnomo informed that he has screenshot all the participants. Thank you very much once more again. Thank you very much. See you again.
Okay, bye-bye.
See you, Pak Hamzah. See you, Pak Arwadi. See you, Prof. Mansur, and see you all the participants.
Minta yang angkatan 2019.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah selesai. Ah, tuntung dah nih.
Master. Apa? Kok tahu? Siapa tuh MS? Pak Jani?